Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to move the resolution entitled Ending of the Economic, Commercial and Financial Blockade imposed by the United States of America against the Republic of Cuba and the removal of Cuba from the list of state-sponsored terrorism. Recalling the resolution adopted in the House of Assembly at its session held in April 26, 2021, whereas the sovereign equality of states, non-intervention, non-interference in their internal affairs, and freedom of international trade and navigation are fundamental principles enshrined in numerous international legal instruments, whereas the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly on the necessity of ending the economic, financial, and commercial embargo imposed by the United States of America against Cuba, adopted on October 30th, 2024, and the other 31 resolutions with the same objective approved by that Assembly since 1992. Whereas the statement of the 47th Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community, reiterating its calls for the lifting of the unjust, unilateral financial, economic, and trade embargo wrongfully imposed on the people and the government of the Republic of Cuba over the last 62 years by the government of the United States of America, and for Cuba to be immediately removed from the U.S. State Department's list of state sponsors of terrorism, dated July 30th, 2024. Whereas the statement of the government of Dominica calling for removal of Cuba on United States state-sponsor of terrorism list, dated May 21st, 2024. And whereas we recognize but respect that the political system of the Commonwealth of Dominica and that of the Republic of Cuba are different and hold true to the policy of non-interference in the internal politics of any nation. And whereas the people and government of the Republic of Cuba have significantly contributed globally in health services, education, and the fight against injustice for over the last 60 years. And whereas the United States of America initiated an economic blockade on Cuba since 1962 and placed Cuba on the list of state sponsors of terrorism in 2021. And whereas the blockade has significantly damaged the Cuban economy, with accumulated damages estimated to be $164 billion over 6 decades, and this blockade has caused more harm than good to the ordinary citizens by preventing them from enjoying their basic human rights and human dignity. Furthermore, the unilateral action of placing Cuba on the list of state sponsors of terrorism by the United States of America has increased the country's difficulties in entering trade and carrying out financial operations, which we view as counterproductive, and has exacerbated the plight of the Cuban citizenry on the brink of basic human survival. Taking notes of the declarations and resolutions of numerous intergovernmental forums, bodies, and governments that unequivocally reject the unilateral financial, economic, and trade embargo imposed on the people and government of Cuba by the United States of America, and strongly condemn the unjust inclusion of Cuba on the United States State Department's list of state sponsors of terrorism. Be it resolved that this Honorable House reiterates that in the recognition of the inalienable human rights of the citizens of Cuba, call on a cessation of the economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the United States of America against the Republic of Cuba, and recommend that in the interest of brotherhood, that the initiative started by the Obama-Biden administration be rekindled. Also, reiterates that in the spirit of justice and encouraging regional and international cooperation, we strongly condemn the policy action taken by the United States of America and recommend that the Republic of Cuba be removed from the list of state sponsors of terrorism. Mr. Speaker, I commend the resolution to the House.
The resolution is before the House for debate. Yes, Honorable Alfred.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to support the resolution before the House because, Mr. Speaker, all Cuba has been is kind. Cuba has just been kind, and it looks as if people feel threatened by Cuba's resolute, resilient spirit. Cuba has been very considerate and has extended this kindness to many, many, many countries, including Dominica. For years now, Cuba has supported Dominica. Mr. Speaker, while this Labour Party was in opposition, I remember Cuban doctors being brought to my community, Good Hope. And that was like since 1978, 79, 80, somewhere there. So we're not talking about a thing now. We're talking about the support we received even while this Labour Party administration was in opposition. Cuba was already offering assistance to Dominica. I can also remember that maybe the very first person from Good Hope who went overseas to further her education went to Cuba. And I'm sure Dr. John wouldn't mind if I call her name. When we didn't know where to fill a form or who to go to or where to ask a question, we were all intelligent, and at that time when you go to high school, Mr. Speaker, and you graduate from grammar school, you're smart, but there's nothing you can do because sometimes you don't have a land paper, and even if you have a land paper, you're not even sure who to ask a question. And my friend Idalene was heading for Cuba. So I can almost think she maybe was the very first person from Good Hope who went to further study for higher learning, and it was in Cuba. So, Mr. Speaker, in addition to all of the other support we get in other sectors like health, Cuba has continued to help us to build capacity in our people, our human resource. The scholarships keep coming, and sometimes as many as 15 in a year. And in addition to the scholarships, we have training workshops, and we have exchanges, and we have offers where people can come over to train our people. So if now we're at a stage where Dominica can boast of specialist doctor in this and in that, and we can boast of specialists in agriculture, and we boast of people who do healthcare in all areas, and we can boast of teachers in Spanish, and we can boast of people, when people didn't even know, Mr. Speaker, when I wasn't even sure how to handle a mouse, the mouse of the computer, I got fed up with that one time. Cuba was already offering people opportunities to go and do computer science because it was new. So if Dominica is at a stage where we can go boast of all of that, we have to attribute at least 95 or 90% of it to the support that we have received from Cuba. And not only do these people work in Dominica, you go to different places and you meet people in very high places. And I dare say, even in some high places in America, in United States of America, you go there and you meet certain people working as the chief executive officer, and you're surprised because they're just from La Plaine in Dominica and they did some high degree in accounts, and when you ask, they did it in Cuba. So even if they're looking as if they are putting a ban on Cuba, indirectly, even the United States of America is receiving what Cuba had to offer and still offers. Mr. Speaker, Cuba continues to offer a whole lot of training to us. Cuba continues to help us to feel a great sense of self-esteem. I mean, maybe we do not think about it long enough. But before, according to what you had to do, you had to send a person overseas to get it done. Or you had to beg for somebody to send a person down. Now we don't have to do that anymore. We go to the hospital and we meet how many people walking around and doctors, and they tell you they studied in Cuba. We have people who are doing what would normally have to pay to go overseas to do. The vast potential of this country, and then you had the opportunity to visit Cuba. It's sad. I mean, if you understand a little thing, it's sad to see that the vast potential of that place is crying out to be released. It's sad because the education of the people, what they have inside of them, they are crying to be given a chance. The people who have so much to offer, they deserve as much as what they have to offer and more. These people are diligent, they are hardworking, they are patriotic, and I believe that they should be given a fair chance to live and enjoy life like every other human being everywhere else on this planet. The children of Cuba, so talented, I couldn't help. I bought wooden toys to bring back for my grandchild. And I ensured that he took them to school and he used them for show and tell, to speak to the other children in his class that the only toys that the children from Cuba can have are these wooden toys made in Cuba. They are well made, they are high class, they are tech, and you can see the amount of technology that go into making those wooden toys. But people need to know, while everybody else can go and buy all kinds of remote control cars and all kinds of things, that these children, they are limited to playing with wooden toys. So I have my wooden cars at home, I have my wooden toys, and every time he moves to another class or another group, he must show and tell. He must show and tell what these children are playing with, which is good, but I think these children, they deserve to enjoy everything else what other children, especially in our region, are enjoying. They need to be given the opportunity like all other children. Mr. Speaker, I didn't even plan to speak, but I was just moved because I think enough is enough. Enough is enough. And I believe too that time is running out. And we have to accelerate and we have to press a little harder to ensure that a people so considerate, a people so intelligent, a people so diligent, with so much potential, be given a chance to thrive like any other people in any other country. It is cruel, it is unfair, it is unjust, and it is time for that to stop. So I stand and I support wholeheartedly this resolution.
Yes, Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. The, the last resolution, which was moved and adopted at the General Assembly as the resolution before the House Assembly indicated, was held in October of 2024. There are 193 countries who make up the membership of the UN. 187 out of 193 countries voted in favor of the resolution calling for the removal of the blockade against Cuba. There were 2 against, and there was 1 abstention. that one abstention is a country called Moldova. So that's the only European country which supported, or abstained rather, the resolution. Every European country who is a member of the United Nations supported the resolution calling for the removal of the blockade. And every country on the continent of Africa supported it. And every country on the continent of Asia supported this. Australia, New Zealand, all of the countries in the Pacific, last year only one from the Pacific did not vote, but this country supported this last time. And every country in the Caribbean and Latin America supported the resolution calling for the embargo to be removed. And if all of us here are students of politics, and I want to think that we follow nations' political system and who is in government and who is not. And you will recognize that in many countries in Europe where you have what you call the far right or the center right governments, those governments supported the removal of the resolution of the embargo on Cuba. In Asia as well, Southeast Asia. And so this goes beyond boundaries. It goes beyond differences. It goes beyond ideological and philosophical differences. This is about justice. And this is not, and I want to say to the Dominican people, because sometimes I think that we in this part of the world, sometimes we quiver, we don't want to speak, we are afraid to speak because we believe that we are attacking the United States of America. This is not the case. We're not attacking the United States of America. What we're speaking about is an injustice that has been imposed on a nation since 1962. And it was imposed on Cuba not because Cuba did not bomb anybody. Cuba did not engage in any terrorist activities. As a matter of fact, there are terrorist activities that have been leveled against Cuba. With the bombing of the aircraft right there in our Caribbean space, killing so many people. We have to be an enlightened people in this world. We have to be a people who stand on the side of justice and equality and respect of human rights. When you deny a nation, children and people to food, food has been defined to be a human right. Access to food. People have a right to self-determine. We fought for, our forefathers fought for emancipation as black people and indigenous people and Jewish people who were subjected to the worst atrocities by Hitler and his people. And we all stood against it. Racism is a cancer in the world that we have to speak about. So these things are a matter of justice. And it's not an ideological thing. It is not a philosophical thing. That is something that's entrenched in human civilization. And so we have to be careful as a people that we don't appear to be quivering. Understand? Wherever this government goes, wherever we get an opportunity, whoever is representing this government, we have a clear mandate that we must stand in solidarity with Cuba, and we must always call for the removal of the embargo against Cuba. Whether it's the president who addresses the United Nations, or myself, or the Minister of Foreign Affairs, this is central to our speech at the UN. And we're not doing so, Mr. Speaker, because of the scholarships that Cuba has given to us, or the doctors are there, or nurses are there. This doesn't change our principal position. Doesn't change our principal position. It's not about what we get or we don't get. That's not how we operate. We operate on a matter of principle. Principle. And I always say you don't negotiate principle, you negotiate words. And so I believe that we have to be courageous. Because if our foreparents whether indigenous or Afro, black people, were not courageous, where would we be today? We'd be slaves. There would be no Kalinagos existing in Dominica. And we can't have a situation where a country has the potential to provide for itself and be part of the global architecture, the global framework, the global system, and be denied to do so. The situation in Cuba now, as it has been since 1962, has caused the Caribbean to be worse off, has caused the world to be worse off. And the country under embargo, when we're confronted with COVID-19, was not able to send doctors and nurses to many countries, including developed countries, but they were able to develop vaccine in the developing world, in the global south. And not only for its citizens, but for everyone who wanted to have access to it. And one can understand and imagine the contribution that Cuba can make to this world. And those of us that keep saying, oh, students of history will know, will recognize that Cuba has played a role in the liberation of many countries across the world. In Angola, had it done for Cuba, Angola would still be under colonial rule today. South Africa, this is why when President Mandela came out of prison, one of the first people he wanted to meet was Fidel Castro. Not because he admired Fidel Castro as a human being and being one of the greatest leaders that the world has seen, but because of Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution and the Cuban people's contribution to the ANC. All of the 27 years which Mandela stayed in prison, at their side in the struggle was the Cuban people, with limited and no resources. Because they too understand, as the Cuban people, understand the importance of being free, the importance of being part, irrespective of your race, your culture, your class, your religion, your creed. And as the resolution indicated by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we have two different political systems. There are countries with king and queen, we respect that. That's the countries, we're not interfering in that. All we're saying is that this injustice has to come to an end. And so I'm happy once again that we're here in the parliament signaling to the world that not only from the executive of the country, that's to say the government, but the parliament is in support of the removal of the embargo against Cuba. And so the ambassador is here, and we're happy that he's here to witness this undying and unwavering commitment to solidarity. And for me, Mr. Speaker, as a young boy growing up, I could tell you about many of those liberation struggles across the world at age 7 or age 8. Reading about this, whether it's Palestine, whether it's the Cuban Revolution, whether it's Allende in Chile, reading about them. And so in me, Mr. Speaker, it is within my DNA, within my psyche. This is why our programs here, notwithstanding even when we have challenges, financial challenges, we remain true to our commitment to the less fortunate. This is not a political consideration for me, Mr. Speaker. This has been my entire life as a young boy growing up to today. I believe that we have a duty and obligation to be truly our neighbor's keeper. And you don't give people from the excess that you have, because that's not giving. You give them from the little that you have. And this is biblical too. When this lady came and she gave the little that she had, and this man with all his riches gave the church everything. And he was excited, he gave everything, and no. It's what you give from your heart. Not for any consideration. This is why when we give a house, people come, people tell me, scared about this, we give this person a house, and the person says, they're not going to vote for you. It's okay with me. It's okay. It's okay. And so we have to stand, Mr. Speaker. We have to continue to fight injustice. If Martin Luther King did not take up his struggle, Malcolm X did not take the struggle, Rosa Parks, all of these people sacrificed to allow black people in America to be respected to the point where we had a black man as a president of the United States. Standing on the shoulders of those who have gone before them and struggled and sacrificed. This is why here, Mr. Speaker, you see that this government has spent an inordinate amount of money in the Canada territory. And we don't do so because of politics. Because I understand from a historical standpoint how indigenous communities in all of those countries have been marginalized. Marginalized. Anywhere in the world you go, Mr. Speaker, you'll see indigenous people are marginalized. Second-class citizen. And that's how the Canada goes were treated. In many parts, in many respects normally. But we not only elevated them by way of the economic and social advancement, but to the point where we have a female Kananago person, indigenous person as our president. The highest office, in constitutional office in the country. And so we'd like to see Cuba, Mr. Speaker, come and be part. And this is why we are always calling for reform at the United Nations. Because unless we get the United Nations to function in the way that it should function, where the majority rules, this is democracy. We can't have different definitions of democracy when it suits us in the world. If we go to United Nations and vote, and the majority says, we have to democratize the UN to allow for people to feel a sense of being part of the decision-making process. But what is happening in Cuba, the challenges that they're going through, not imposed, not self-imposed, but imposed largely because of this. And I don't think we understand the extent of this reach of this embargo. That any entity, any company that's owned by the Americans, an American, not Americans, an American, whether it's a hotel or a restaurant or a car dealership or a bank, cannot do trade with Cuba. So if a Cuban minister or Cuban ambassador or diplomat goes into a country and he wants to stay at a hotel that's owned by an American, he can't go in. This is segregation. This is apartheid. This is injustice. Just imagine if any one of us in this world would go somewhere and they say, well, this bus is not for you. This is what happened in America up to recently. In South Africa. And so I know sometimes people see our comments, people see the Minister of Foreign Affairs comments, they see my comments because we're the main spokesperson of the government on external matters. And I know some people quiver because they believe that we are attacking the United States or something. No, you're completely misconstrued. You're completely wrong. This is about standing on principle and fighting injustice. You have a situation confronting Haiti. Everybody has fled Haiti. The only people left, doctors and nurses, ensuring that children and senior citizens have medical care at the Cuban Brigade. And I recall one year when Pakistan got this major earthquake. And at the time, Cuba had no diplomatic relations with Pakistan. The first country which deployed resources to help in the rescue efforts was the Cuban Brigade, with, I believe, over 200 plus personnel, doctors and people to search and rescue and so on. And so I am happy to be part, but in a emotional way, of the crusade for calling for the removal of the blockade against Cuba. And every US president I had the opportunity to meet, every ambassador I met, every member of the US cabinet I met, we raised that with them. We raised that with them. And I also say at the CARICOM level as well. And so I want to thank the Minister of Foreign Affairs for presenting this resolution on behalf of the government. And I do hope that it will get the resounding, unanimous support. Not by a vote, but at the end of the debate, by every one of us standing and be counted, standing to show the world that this parliament in the Council of Dominica is united in its commitment and its call for the removal of the blockade against Cuba. And I want to say to my colleagues in Parliament that history will be kind to us if we stand on the side of justice and we call out injustice, no matter who it's coming from. And this is why you recognize this government, we've always opposed sanctions. We never support sanctions because we understand that sanctions hurt the unsuspecting, the vulnerable. There's no way in the world the sanctions have worked. It is bringing more pain to people than we. This is why we don't support wars. From a principle standpoint. Because wars only bring pain and suffering, death and destruction. And we believe that the world should push more of peace, togetherness, using the resources to fight climate change, using the resources to fight poverty, to ensure that every child, every woman has access to education, decent housing. The world has enough resources to address all of the world's problems. Just that the world is not putting the resources in the right way, in the right places. And we hope and dream. We must never give up. Never give up. This is why we keep fighting the injustices of climate change. And even sometimes where we feel despondent, we feel like giving up. Every year we come to the COP, the Conference of the Parties, we determine should we attend? Should we go? Both at a national level and CARICOM level. But we're reminded of our own thinking, own reflection, that our forebears did not give up on the struggle for our emancipation as black people and people across the world. That many died so that we could live. And if we are on earth living, the question is, what are we going to do with that life? What are we going to do with that talent and that skill and that knowledge that we have? And that ability to speak and that ability to communicate. And I'll say to people who want to play double games, so they say to the Cubans and others in night, we stand with you. We're with you. And when day falls, it's something different. Something different. I will say to you that at the end of the day, no one will have respect for you. No one will have respect for you. Your commitment at night must also be transparent in day. And this is why this government, we are very transparent with where we stand on this matter. And this is why, as a party called the Dominican Labour Party, we are very transparent with where we stand on this matter. Because our founding was to address injustices within our own country, where people of dark skin could not enter the banks and to work in the banks, had no access to education and decent housing, access to water. This is why the Labour Party was formed. And we use the shoe to indicate our movement that we shall walk the length and breadth of this country to advocate for a better way of life for the people of Dominica. And I'm happy that almost 75 years later, those principles of the Labour Party still stand today. And that we're extending those principles to our views and our positions on global issues, like that struggle of the Cuban people. Because lest we forget, and this is why those of us, and I say us because we take collective responsibility and appreciation for the scholarships that we receive from Cuba. Those of us who studied in Cuba, we can't lose sight of our humanity. We can't lose sight of our own view on life, that we take something from somebody, and that the moment a person needs our support, then we're hiding under a rock. That how could you go and you eat at the man's table, you slept in his bed, you benefited from his benevolence and the little that he had, and he gave it to you. And then he needs your support, he needs your voice, and you have no voice, but you are benefiting from their struggles. That what we just to discuss because they gave it to us. Where's the gratitude? Yes, the Lord loves a cheerful giver, but he also loves people who show gratitude. Because in life, it's not about what you can get, but rather what you can give. And so I don't want to call out people, but we have to do so. We're all the Cuban grads, as they call themselves. Where's the movement on the streets? Where's the movement on social media? Where's the advocacy? Where is it? That we've turned the Cuban struggle into an ideological issue? No. So I am hoping that my comments are viewed from the point of view of poking your consciousness rather than criticism. And that we all recognize that we can do better and we can do more to help the Cuban people who today will not have access to light, to electricity in their homes because they cannot transact to purchase items. And who have to choose between breakfast and lunch because they don't have the means to purchase the items to produce. And whose machinery on the farms to feed themselves are dysfunctional because they can't get spare parts. Imagine if that were us, and when I say us, I'm not necessarily talking about us here in the parliament, I'm talking about the global community. If that were us who were suffering these things, these injustices, what would we do? And what would we like people to do on our behalf? Had we not advocated for the end of apartheid all over the world, from musicians to politicians to ordinary working class people, trade unions, for 27 plus years, knocking at the door of apartheid, Nelson Mandela would have died in prison. And apartheid would have still been existing today in Africa. That's recent history. In the 1990s, That's not 1990, that's not 1892 or 1792. The 90s, the 21st century. And we have an apartheid situation confronting Cuba, imposed on it. And out of 193 countries, 187 saying enough is enough. And even in the United States of America, polls have shown, independent polls have shown that the majority of Americans support the removal of the embargo on Cuba. The vast majority. And this is one of the reasons why President Obama visited Cuba. This is why President Obama made some changes to allow for greater economic and trade opportunities as a first step. And this is why they exchanged ambassadors and reopened the embassies, because they had in 3 sections. We call them ambassador. And we're saying, and Mr. Speaker, I believe that the second term of President Trump will be a good term. Looking at his mannerism, his behavior, his approach, he has appointed a Treasury Secretary who is openly gay. He's appointed many women when people felt that he was opposed to women in key positions, including the Chief of Staff. And so you can see, in my view, he's on the right track. And I will beseech President Trump, that at the first step, let's go to the Obama decisions, and let's take the decision from there. And he has our support, he has our encouragement to do so. And I think history will record him as the most ambitious, the most successful president that the United States will have ever produced in his entire over 200 plus years of existence. And we will stand in complete solidarity with him when that action is taken. And so we'll continue the advocacy. I want to say to the Cuban people that we stand in solidarity with you, and we will never give up on the fight until that injustice comes to an end. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
Yes, Honorable Laville, then Honorable Williams. Oh, you yield to the lady. Honorable Williams, you may proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Laville. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've listened to the Honorable Prime Minister, and really, it would be remiss of me not to speak, even for a few minutes, in support of the resolution before this Honorable House. Prime Minister gave a historical account, and what I'm here to say this afternoon is really my own experience. I'm going to give you my own experience. I had the privilege of studying in Cuba, being the daughter of a housewife and a police officer, unable to study medicine because we couldn't afford it. But I had a dream. Yes, I had a dream of being a doctor, a medical doctor. A dream that was unrelenting, a dream that I could not really let go of. And after graduating from the Dominican Grammar School and going to Sifocor, I began working, trying to help my family to make ends meet. And I thought, that I would never accomplish that dream until the opportunity was given to me in 1998. I went to Cuba, and what an experience it was. I learned the real meaning of honor, what it is to honor those in authority, to honor your leader. I looked at the Cuban people as they constantly said, "Viva Fidel." I think that was one of the things that caused Fidel Castro to live so long. His people declared over him life every day because he was a good leader. I learned some of the history. I learned about Che Guevara and Jose Marti and the struggles for freedom. I saw a people struggle daily for the very basic needs. And you know, one of the first impressions I had of them was, man, these people can make anything out of nothing. I'm telling you, I heard my colleague mention their talent. They can literally make anything out of nothing. I learned what universal education was about because everybody in Cuba was given the opportunity to go to school, and it was free from kindergarten to university. And people took pride in education. Jose Marti said, "Ser culto es el único forma de ser libre." Being educated is the only way to be free. I would translate, Honorable Mr. Speaker, and that's another thing. I learned Spanish. As a matter of fact, I was given the opportunity to leave Cuba after the first year to go to Guyana to continue studies, and I refused. Despite the struggle, despite the hardships that I personally experienced there, I decided I could have 2 degrees, one in medicine and one in Spanish. Today, I can speak fluent Spanish. And so I thank God for the privilege. And I'm so happy that our Prime Minister stands with Cuba. And he has sounded the call today. And I really hope that all my colleagues, the Cuban graduates, are listening today. And we will indeed make a strident effort to show more support for Cuba. And so I wholeheartedly give my support to this resolution before the House. Thank you very much.
Yes, Honorable Laville, you recognize. May proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. How profound, certainly deep, and I'm sure for many listening, maybe many of you must have been moved to tears after hearing that testimony from Honorable Dr. Williams. And I too, Mr. Speaker, I stand in solidarity with Cuba, and I stand to respond to that call by our Honorable Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit. And while it's not the norm on our side to stand and speak after he did, but he asked for all of us, each of us, to stand in solidarity with Cuba. As the Minister for Health, Wellness, and Social Services, Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me if I would merely sit and say nothing, or even merely sit and listen, because our ministry, our sector, is one that over the years has benefited probably most profoundly. And for that, we're indeed grateful and blessed. Standing in support and solidarity with Cuba is not merely saying, I am against the blockade and I am for the removal of Cuba from the list of state-sponsored terrorism. Mr. Speaker, standing means, therefore, that we are against injustice. We're against the challenges that the people face, the atrocities, the injustices, Mr. Speaker. Standing means an expression that we are tethered to the basic dignities that God has willed for all of us as a people. It is standing for our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean who are just like us. It's standing for the people in Dominica and around the world who have benefited from the medical brigade. Standing for Cuba means that you're in agreement with the millions of lives that have been saved, with the thousands of people like Dr. Williams and many others who have benefited from continued education in Cuba. Standing means, Mr. Speaker, that we are for our brothers and sisters. Mr. Speaker, imagine, and I'll take you back to the moments after Hurricane Maria that some few years ago. Imagine the challenges that we faced, the ships that came to our shores delivering basic food items, rations, water, adult diapers, and so on, Mr. Speaker. Imagine each of those small vessels or larger ships having to face sanctions for merely coming to our shores to help our people. These are some of the atrocities that the people face in Cuba. A ship that would have come to deliver fuel, basic medicines, would face challenges, increased or inflated insurances, blockages in terms of entries to ports in various countries, reputational risk, reputational damage. These are the challenges that they face. Every day they're faced with the nuances as to how do I receive fuel, as PM would have said. How do I keep on doing my agriculture even when I have vast fertile land, but then there's no fuel? For the past few weeks, if we've watched the news, we have seen the people in Cuba suffering because Cuba has been dark. No electricity. Almost total outage, power outages, Mr. Speaker. Imagine that. Imagine Dominica being completely blacked out for weeks. Imagine that. I had the pleasure and privilege to visit Cuba earlier this year in April. I was able to stay at one of the newer hotels, but even so, despite of how it appeared, the architecture, opulence, probably if it's compared to some of those in Dominica, there were challenges even to serve breakfast. Cheese and sausages, things that are normally manufactured in Cuba. But with the challenges they face with receiving fuel, the manufacturing sector would have been hit. These are the daily challenges of the people for over 60 years. Mr. Speaker, while I won't consider myself a student of history necessarily in a formal way, but there are some important lessons that I have learned. And when I recall the story of how the United States of America would have been built, and I recall the persecution of the Pilgrims and the Puritans, and it's from that persecution that they moved to the United States of America, Mr. Speaker, and created that city on a hill, that city of promise, that promised land, Mr. Speaker. It was persecution, religious persecution at that time that forced that move. And today what you find is that the United States of America is now a country that is really the world's #1 economy. So it says to me, therefore, that it must be in fact true that adversity oftentimes can in fact be the mother of invention. And when I look at the way that the people of Cuba operate, it is exactly that. Because when I had the pleasure and privilege to visit the hospital, I saw in the physiotherapy room, Mr. Speaker, no Bowflexes and this high-tech equipment that we often have in different rehab centers around the world. What I saw instead was construction rebar that we use in concrete. And it is bent, it is modified, and you have weights, steel weights or concrete weights in some cases to rehabilitate people, Mr. Speaker. I see people using the most basic resources that they have to find solutions for themselves and their people. So I say to the people of Cuba, keep on the faith, keep on trying. Your day will come. Your day will come. Mr. Speaker, going through some of the hospitals, when I look at the buildings, I can see that the architecture really, truly magnificent. However, they find challenges maintaining their buildings. But even so, the doctors, the nurses, the clinicians, they don't complain, Mr. Speaker. They don't have, like us, in some cases, or 6 imaging modalities in some of the hospitals like we do. But yet, Mr. Speaker, what they have is a wonderful attitude towards treating people, towards finding solutions, towards being innovative, Mr. Speaker. That is what I see when I encounter the people of Cuba. They have their challenges, Mr. Speaker. So that is why I find difficulty in comprehending how a country that faces so much economic hardship could in fact support international terrorist groups. We know the cost of war, Mr. Speaker. I can't imagine any leader deciding to keep his people in the dark and instead send money to support terrorism around the world, Mr. Speaker. It does not make sense. But instead, what you find is a country that instead has offered its support to counter-terrorism measures over the years. In post the 9/11 attacks, Cuba offered the United States of America support in counter-terrorism. In 1996, Mr. Speaker, there was a plane bombing, and there was a Cuban American who was wanted, who was likely connected to this bombing. And Cuba, Mr. Speaker, offered to give him up. Cuba has shown over the years, Mr. Speaker, support to the FBI in major investigations. Everything that they have done has demonstrated that willingness to cooperate, to fight terrorism, fight crime. Even here in the Caribbean, they have come forward numerous times, time and time again, to fight drug trafficking with our fellow CARICOM members, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, here for us in Dominica, we have benefited so tremendously with the aid from Cuba and the cooperation. Right now, we have 58 medical collaborators in Dominica. Just last week, we had the pleasure and privilege to benefit from 6 more who came in. Also, too, for the very first time, we received support with agriculture collaborators as well. And as we move in our thrust to increase in agriculture, Mr. Speaker, they have come forward and offered support. In COVID-19, Mr. Speaker, when the entire world, every single country was vulnerable, Cuba came forward with the Henry Reeves Brigade and sent a team of over 30 collaborators to us here in Dominica to fight COVID. COVID affected them profoundly and seriously, but yet they came forward to help their fellow brothers and sisters around the Caribbean and all over. Even with the challenges that they face, the tremendous setbacks that they face, they themselves created a vaccine that proved to work. This is the innovation that exists. Mr. Speaker, what this means, therefore, is that blockade that exists, that has been on Cuba, imposed of them wrongly so for over 60 years, all it means is that the world is being deprived of a formidable force, Mr. Speaker. Most recently, Cuba would have created Herboprot P. Mr. Speaker, it's a new medicine that helps particularly with diabetic foot ulcers, and it encourages cell growth. And this is something that has proven to work and reduced amputations for those with diabetes. And we are in the process of accepting this here in Dominica. It has been in many parts of the world. This is the innovation that exists. And the more Cuba continues to be oppressed, the more the world is deprived of glory. Mr. Speaker, I wholeheartedly support ending of the economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed on Cuba, and also the removal of Cuba from the list of state-sponsored terrorism. Mr. Speaker, in the very words of Fidel Castro, Mr. Speaker, I say to you all, hasta la victoria siempre. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So your last statement, I guess.
Until victory, always.
Okay. Any other members?
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Senator Parrish, recognize you may proceed.
Thank you. And I know the minister was about to wrap up, but I too would like to lend my voice to the support of this resolution. This is not something that should even be a debate. It is not something that people can even question. People under oppression should be free. And even if we got this early this morning, and we came, on behalf of all of us, I'd like to express our support for the people of Cuba. Every interaction I've had with a nurse or a doctor or someone from the Brigada has been pleasant. I've always known the people of Cuba to be industrious, and in spite of what they go through, always support everyone, given from the little that they have. I have a number of family members, colleagues, friends who have had the opportunity to study in Cuba. And to see this, my life has been affected positively because of the resolve of the Cuban people. And Dominica is a better place because of our friendship with them. So in these short words, Mr. Speaker, my full support to the resolution.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all members of the House, for supporting the resolution. You have joined 187 countries in doing that. And I never could understand during my days as Dominica's permanent representative to the United Nations, how is it that the vast majority, in any measure, any system of democracy, you're not even talking about a simple majority. You're talking about a supermajority. More than 2/3 of the membership of an organization have voted in support of the removal of the embargo against the Republic of Cuba, and yet it stands. It begs you to question the validity of international law and whether, in fact, there is any such thing. That whether it's, in fact, it depends on who does it. But interestingly, as the Prime Minister made reference to the last resolution on October 30th, the United Nations, the two countries that voted no, the United States of America and Israel. But there was one lesson out of that vote this year. Usually there were some countries that would always vote with the United States. It's as if it were written in their constitution. But they didn't this time. Because I looked for them. especially in the Pacific, there are a few countries that always either voted with the US or abstained, and they did neither this time. So I believe the time is coming when more and more countries are adding their voices, and it is our hope that in some way it will influence the United States. And sometimes it's not just the executive, but the Congress as well. I know there's a lot of trepidation, and as a matter of fact, people have a lot of reasons to be fearful of what the new administration, US administration may do, especially because of who has been already nominated as Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, of Cuban descent, but has had a very strong view on Cuba. But that notwithstanding, we still must be hopeful. I remember in 2009 when we met in San Pedro Sula in Honduras. That is where we were able to convince the then Secretary of State incoming, Hillary Clinton, that we wanted to rescind a decision of the OAS that expelled Cuba from that organization. And we were successful. Peter David, at the time, was Foreign Minister of Grenada. Myself, we were the lead together in consultation with Bruno, your Foreign Minister. We pushed on until we were able to convince, well, Maduro was Foreign Minister at the time too, of Venezuela. So he was there, and our friends from Honduras at the time, the Zelaya regime, and we had people from Nicaragua who were pushing, and we pushed through. St. Vincent and the Grenadines as well. I think Straker was Minister of Foreign Affairs. And we pushed through, and we were able to get that small victory for Cuba. But it was significant because we wanted to correct a historic wrong. So I'm still hopeful, and I believe that we should continue in our efforts to encourage the United States to review its position on Cuba. And this new administration, we have an opportunity to do that. Because I remember the wisdom of the words of Minister Bruno at the time when we were heading to Port of Spain with President Obama at the Summit of the Americas. He advised us that we should not unduly pressure President Obama even before he was sworn in. Let us give him the opportunity. Let us encourage him, and let us try to make it easier for them to reconsider their position. And we saw some progress then. We hope that the same will obtain this time as we continue to push on. But I want to say something as well about the resilience, the strength, the tenacity of the Cuban people, but also a lesson I learned. I remember in the early days, my first visit to Cuba was in 2000. And I was a little boy at the time, I guess. I went there. There was a guy who graduated from Cuba who was holding my hand, showing me around. And because Rosie Douglas at the time felt I should go to Cuba to attend one of the meetings of CARICOM in Cuba. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The fact that these people, under a blockade, embargo, were so creative, were able to make things work. And I just could not believe the way they were able to push through and still create great things. And then I went back there as Minister of Sport. I remember that. And we visited a facility, a volleyball facility. And if anybody who's following, volleyball internationally, not that I was, but I got the lecture. From the 90s to 2000, Cuba dominated world volleyball. Olympic Games, World Championship, the Americas, all over the place. Cuba dominated. And I visited that facility, and it was nothing fantastic. So what it told me, it was really the strength, the determination of people. That's how people achieve great things. It's not just nice facilities, not just nice things. We have plenty nicer things, though, yeah, in sports. But that was a lesson then, that they were able, Javier Sotomayor, I mean, world-renowned high jumper, still have the world record. He was able to do all of this coming from Cuba. And the Cuban people have achieved great things, and we have to admire that. And I agree with Minister of Health, that the world is being made poorer with this embargo against Cuba. If Cuba were to open up and get the opportunity to truly explore that potential, I mean, which country in the world that could have so many graduates per capita? I'm not sure if there's any other country in the world. Imagine all of these people were to be empowered and to be allowed to live their full potential. Imagine what Cuba could contribute to the world. Cuba, I even found out that Cuba was exploring OTEC energy in the 1960s. that one blew me off. So Cuba has a lot to offer. And if given that opportunity, we really do hope that one day there will be. So, Mr. Speaker, we continue to stand in solidarity, and I want to thank the Prime Minister for always giving us that clear instruction and support to always stand with Cuba. There's no hesitation, there's no discussion, no debate. We always stand with Cuba. But one of the things that is remarkable about our position, and that of CARICOM, by the way, that's the only issue I know all of CARICOM agrees on. The only issue, the last meeting I chaired here for foreign ministers of CARICOM, we had a resolution on Cuba unanimously. We don't debate. The only thing, according to the Prime Minister, we don't debate the principle, we debate the text. So it's the words, the language. But that is one issue that CARICOM has always agreed on, without blinking, without hesitation. And what it has done for us, in the eyes of the international community, is give us some respect. Because people see, I mean, the US is your neighbor. You know, you depend on the US for tourism, for a lot of things, yet you can stand so united. So people around the world are always impressed at how we can have such a unified position on Cuba and speak loudly, not secretly. We don't shy, we don't go in a corner. We stand out loudly. And I must thank Ambassador Aaron, our permanent representative to the United Nations. He presented a very strong statement, and I was very, very proud that Dominica once again stood with Cuba in the international community so that we can make our voices be heard to call for the end of the unilaterally imposed financial, commercial, and economic embargo against Cuba and having Cuba on the list of state sponsors of terrorism. Ambassador, please convey to your government our continued support, our friendship, and you can always count on us. And truly, la lucha continua. Thank you.
So for the record, this concludes the debate. For the records, do we have unanimous agreement? Okay, so we'll go through the formality now. Be it resolved that this Honorable House, 1. Reiterate that in the recognition of the inalienable rights, human rights of the citizens of Cuba, call on a cessation of economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the USA against Cuba, and recommend that in the interest of brotherhood, that the initiative started by the Obama-Biden administration be rekindled. 2. Also, reiterate that in the spirit of justice and encouraging regional and international cooperation, we strongly condemn the policy action taken by the USA and recommend that Republic of Cuba be removed from the list of state-sponsored terrorism. Those in favor?
Mr. Speaker, sorry. I sought to make an amendment, but it wasn't captured. It's just a matter of form, but I think it has significance for posterity. USA, let's spell it out. United States of America. And wherever we say Cuba, we put the Republic of Cuba. It's just formality. Thank you.
So for the record again, be it resolved that this Honorable House reiterate that in the recognition of the inalienable human rights of the citizens of Cuba, call on the cessation of economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the United States of America against Cuba and against the Republic of Cuba, and recommend that in the interest of brotherhood, that the initiative started by the Obama-Biden administration be rekindled. 2, also reiterate that in the spirit of justice and encouraging regional and international cooperation, we strongly condemn the policy action taken by the United States of America and recommend that the Republic of Cuba be removed from the list of state-sponsored terrorism. State sponsors of terrorism. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The motion has been approved unanimously.
Authorization for an additional credit facility from the International Development Association, IDA, for funding of the Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project. Whereas by virtue of Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of the 1990 revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, the House of Assembly may, by resolution duly passed, authorize the minister responsible for finance to borrow money from approved sources or guarantee loans to statutory boards or public corporations for the purpose of financing general development purposes in any foreign currency or currencies. And whereas procured a loan from the International Development Association to fund this Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, DVRP, which includes funds for the design and rehabilitation of the East Coast Road from Boadiab to Hatton Garden via Castlebrus and the Kalinago territory. And whereas an additional amount not exceeding SDR 30.1 million, that's US 40 million, or EC 108 million equivalent, is required to meet the additional cost of rehabilitation due to remedial works required as a result of change in site conditions since the completion of the original designs and to increase the resilience of that section of the road. And whereas this additional financing will assist Dominica in the reduction of vulnerability to natural hazards and climate change impacts through investment in resilient infrastructure. And whereas the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica intends to borrow the amount required from the International Development Association. Be it resolved that in accordance with Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of the 1990 revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, this Honorable House authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of credit from the International Development Association a sum not exceeding 30,100,000 SDR, equivalent to 40 million United States dollars or 108 million EC, on the following terms. Interest rate, 0.75% per annum. Commitment charge, 0.5% per annum. Repayment, 60 semi-annual installments commencing March 15, 2035. Grace period, 10 years. This amount is to be used for the rehabilitation of the road from Boadiab to Hatton Garden via Castle Bruce and Kalinago territory.
Second the motion.
Mr. Speaker, the government procured a loan from the International Development Association of the World Bank to fund its disaster vulnerability reduction project. The design and rehabilitation of the East Coast Road from Boadiab to Hatton Garden via Castle Bruce and the Kalinago territory is the main project under the DVRP. A contract in the amount of Eastern Caribbean $126,775,489 was awarded for the full rehabilitation of that section of the road, Phase 1. Works began in November 2020 and are nearing completion. However, there has been some cost overruns on that project, mainly caused by change in the site conditions due to a number of weather events, such as the November 2022 trough, which affected the eastern part of the island. As a result of these events, some additional, more robust structures were required. For example, on Lot 1, that's Boadiab to Castle Bruce, there were 6 retaining walls in the original designs. However, 14 retaining walls were subsequently required and built. And secondly, changes to design to increase the resilience of that road. For example, installing much larger culverts to reduce the likelihood of flooding and damage along this new road. As stated in the resolution, approval is being requested for an additional loan of SDR 30.1 million, that is US 40 million or EC 108 million. The IDA's board approved the loan on December 6, 2024. The terms are very concessional. As I said earlier, 0.75% per annum, that's the interest rate. The commitment charge of 0.5% per annum. Repayment is 60 semi-annual installments commencing March 15, 2035, and a grace period of 10 years. The loan has been evaluated in the context of government's medium-term debt strategy, and it is consistent with the objectives of the strategy. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important road for the people of Dominica, in particular the people of the East. We as a government are very happy that we were able to bring yet another quality infrastructure to our people. Mr. Speaker, I now commend the resolution to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is before the House for debate. Yes, I recognize Honorable Alfred. You may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I want to give support to this resolution, the authorization for an additional credit facility from the International Development Association for funding of the Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project. Mr. Speaker, I speak on the reconstruction works on the road from Boadiab to Hatton Garden. Initially, the main objectives of this project to improve infrastructure resilience to disaster events. And I ask permission to refer to my notes because I have some data I would like to correctly.
Your permission granted.
Yes, thank you. And pilot climate change adaptation measures through slope stabilization intervention, rehabilitation of roads, bridges, and retaining walls, and rehabilitation or construction of drainage system. As we heard from the Minister of Finance, funding for this project was made available through both the World Bank and the government of Dominica, initially at almost $127 million. Now, $47.5 million of this amount was expected to be spent in the section from Guadab to Casibros. We had all our works detailed to include rehabilitation and widening of pavement to a travel width of 6.5 meters, and the necessary activities to achieve this were excavation and slope stabilization, replacement of 2 bridges, replacement of culverts of varying sizes, construction of retaining walls, curb slippers, rectangular drains over the complete length of the road, asphalt concrete road surfacing, and other amenities to include road markings and signage. However, Mr. Speaker, the trough on November 6 exposed vulnerable areas on the road which were not previously considered in the project, and they had to be addressed. This resulted in extra costs that were not previously factored in. Installation of 48 culverts 1.2 meters by 1.2 meters to improve water flow, and we had to increase the size because the initial size was 900 millimeters culverts. An additional 19.1, 1.5 by 1.5 had to be additional drains had to be installed for drainage capacity. Now we had to change the culverts, some of them, actually remove them and replace them. And those where we had to use larger culverts, 2.3 meters by 2.3, and we had to tackle larger streams. A number of retaining walls was increased, as you heard, to stabilize and stabilize the land and minimize the landslide. We had the drains, and all of this enhancement significantly improved the road's resilience and ability to handle disaster. Mr. Speaker, our road structure is now more robust, stable, and better equipped to withstand calamities, unexpected events, and ensuring the safety of users, minimizing potential damage too. The project is nearing completion in Lot 1. I stand on behalf of the constituency, the people of Pidit Soufriere, I like to call them out, Pidit Soufriere, Saint-Sauveur, Good Hope, Mopo, Deepa, Formel, and Casibros proper. The lives of these people have changed, transformed for better in every aspect. Mr. Speaker, every time and everywhere you see a new road is being built or an existing road is being improved, this means jobs for the people in that area. Now, in addition to the jobs, $2.8 million were paid to 224 farmers in the Casibros constituency for land, and they also received compensation for their crops. Now, Mr. Speaker, even now where we need to go and repossess little land, we still have to continue payment. Because sometimes you plant something and when you get it a little soggy, you have to go a little further, you must pay the person for their land. And now, glory cedar worth money. So if it's a glory cedar tree that's on the land, you have to compensate. Now, several people from the constituency are still employed on this project. Many of our tradesmen improved their skills and learned new skills. New relationships were built. Mr. Speaker. Travel time has decreased. People are beginning to come again for fish and their produce because Casibros is not far again. We have begun to see savings on shocks and tires and other vehicle parts. Drivers are indeed happier. Smoother ride for patients on the ambulance. More people are visiting our area. Therefore, that means increase in economic activities. Mr. Speaker, the benefits of the East Road project to constituents of Cassibrus are visible and tangible. People in the food production business are engaged. Farmers and fisher folks provide foods to these people to prepare the foods. These food preparation businesses increase their numbers of employees. Workers are being transported. Mr. Speaker, Cassibrus is alive and well. Now, because of this East Road Coast project, Cassibrus is becoming a very active place. And therefore, Dominica is becoming a more modern, developed country. When people do not stick around only in Roseau, it means that we are becoming generally more modern. People don't have to just stick around Roseau. They can come up to Cassibrus and see what's going on there too. The project has not only brought greater comfort and convenience to our people, but value is being added to the lands in the area, and opportunities are opening up now. Our children are growing up in a more modern, developed area than we did, and one that our grandparents could never even dreamed of. As a matter of fact, the track where the people used to walk, passing right by the river, we still have cobblestones there. Our grandparents didn't think that we'd be getting those smooth rides. So we went from that to Tarish, to half walk and half drive. And now, I heard some good news this morning about from roundabout to, because the fellows were saying, but Miss Boy, if you just fix from roundabout to the Tarish Street, we're making it in 30. So like now we're making it in 45 minutes, and you have to tell them, slow down, it's home you're going, you know. You know, so we are glad. And we have come a long way, Mr. Speaker, from waking up at 4 a.m. to take a truck. That would take us 2.5 hours of rocking to get to Roseau. Now we take 40 minutes. Nice ride to Roseau. Mr. Speaker, the value and the beauty of this project have also improved our image and our esteem, and it has increased our sense of belonging and pride. Because people say, "You come and Cassibrus boy, why me not road boy?" You know, it makes you feel as if, but now people don't have this complaint anymore. And above all, Mr. Speaker, the people of the Cassibrus constituency, we are feeling safer because this project has addressed a number of vulnerable areas on this road. We have just come through the rainy season, although it's still there. Not a slide, not a fallen tree, no river overflowing banks. Mr. Speaker, my colleagues are here, they would know. Normally I would already post picture on chat. Big sunshine going on in other places, but we've gone through this season and we can say we are fully satisfied. And we express our gratitude because our experience with this rainy season was the most comfortable we've had compared to years before because of the improvement in the road infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, there was a meeting in Cassibrus yesterday. It was raining, you know, Cassibrus from 11 o'clock, rain. And people started to get a little, and it was like, it's okay. The road is safe and it's better. The road is good and it is safe. And people relax again to continue their meeting. Even at the time, like before me, Mr. Speaker, by the time half an hour, people would be heading back to where they came from. But the road now, the report is, the road is good and it is safe. So you can sit down and enjoy your meeting, even if it's raining. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe any money that is spent to make Dominica and Dominicans safer, it's good. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, I fully support this honorable House to authorize the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of credit from the International Development Association the sum of 108 million Eastern Caribbean dollars at the terms presented. Mr. Speaker, I'm even understanding that some of that work will also address the water problem in Cassibrus. And that is a good news because that is forward thinking and makes sense. Because as we are working on the road, so pipes getting burst, so people staying 3 days, 4 days without water, so people putting blows on Duasco, and sometimes it's not always Duasco's fault. It doesn't make sense for us to just dig in trenches and drains and shipping pipes and then surface the place, and next time we come again to dig the new surface to think pipes again. So I think that's a very good news for Cassibrus people. The Christmas will not be so because we know sometimes the water will drop and we won't have water part of the day. But to know that I'm speaking about that here, to know that is going to be addressed, I think that is good news for the people of the Castle Bruce constituency. And Mr. Speaker, we are still learning. In our area, before it rains, people still get a little nervous. But we are learning, and we have come extremely far. And for implementing these preventative measures, intervention measures, rehabilitation measures, and all of this to reduce the vulnerability to the natural hazards and climate change impacts. Mr. Speaker, that is why even if people want to make you say what they want you to say, people will always have an affection for the Dominican Labour Party, because nobody ever addressed the vulnerability of the area like this party. Everybody know. When I was like 9 years, we had a landslide, covered a nurse and her child. So that's years ago. Nobody didn't take us on. Nobody never thought about doing this or doing that or fixing the road or moving. But today, we are very grateful that this party, this administration is paying attention. And I could sit there and tell you all about our shelter and all about the training that we are getting to ensure and how people handle themselves in disasters. I'm saying to you, we extend our gratitude to this government for undertaking this project. And that's a lot of money in any currency. That is a lot of money. And sometimes I think people do not understand the figures. It's a lot of money that could be used to do a lot of other things, but the choice was made to use it to ensure that the people of the constituency are safer. Now the enhancement of the water project, I mean, I can't even tell you what that means to me. To me myself personally, much as for other people. And I thank the Castillo people for their patience. I thank them for the way that we manage ourselves. And we're happy that we have rivers. And they can't be too hard on me because I myself haven't got water sometimes too, you know. You understand? So we need all together, and we are happy that we have waited and we are patient, and this will be addressed. So, Mr. Speaker, the Casibus constituency wins on all counts, you know, with that road project. We win on all counts. And I want to encourage us, let's do what we have to do so that we can take it to completion. Because, Mr. Speaker, people are asking, when are we going to plant our palm on our roadside, you know, Palred? And I asked already, but the thing is, if you have not been given the certificate, you can't go and just do stuff. So sometimes we just try to kind of clear up the grass. But we are in a position where we're ready now to go and put our palms on our roadside and make it look like some highway in some. Mr. Speaker, I can just imagine what will happen in Castle Bruce when that happens. And so we thank this administration, and I say I fully support the resolution to go on with that. Mr.
Speaker, I'm going to be very short. Speaker, I'm going to stand there. I'm so happy, Mr. Minister for Finance, and I support this measure before the Honorable House. And I'm very happy for my two colleagues, Tricia Bonney and Honorable Minister, of course, Frederick. And because I heard her say that, Mr. Speaker, for messages of dust, we're now seeing the light, from dust to light, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to be very short, but I am going to tie that, Mr. Speaker, to my recollection and memory of the late Prime Minister Rosie Douglas. When he referenced talking to us on Honorable Vince, recall that. And we were just talking about the new Renaissance, and he was talking about the bigger picture of Dominica. And we would normally say, we're not talking about, I'm not interested in fries, fish, and Johnny cake. I'm interested in big things, the international airport, housing revolution, new road infrastructure. Those are what the late, great Rosie Douglas thought of Dominica, and he called it the promise of prosperity. That was what he said. So I'm happy now, Mr. Speaker, you can recall many debates in the House on the other side at the time. They were saying nothing was happening, You can recall that? Nothing was happening on the East Coast Road. All you were seeing was dust. Dust, 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 dust. So now we have moved from dust to light, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to put into perspective the magnitude of that project, Mr. Speaker. Because just speaking about a road by itself, Mr. Speaker, is not adequately actually explaining this great project that this Labour Party administration is embarking on to build a resilient country. And you cannot think about building a resilient country without firstly having a resilient road infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, one of the things we did in 2007, if you can recall, Dr. Henderson, we did a road audit. A road audit. And I can recall as being the minister there. When you look at all our roads, the main roads, 327 kilometers of main road, only 80 kilometers of the road at the time was in fair condition. Not good, fair condition. It means, therefore, Mr. Speaker, when we get into office, our roads, including urban roads, which was 320 meters of our feeder road at the time, and 189 kilometers of urban roads at the time, Mr. Speaker, only 2% of our urban roads were in good condition. It meant 98%, therefore, were in bad condition, Mr. Speaker. That's what we meant. That was the legacy of those who occupied the governance structure of this country before. So we did this road audit. Who was the Prime Minister then? Roosevelt Scarrett. And we decided, I can recall working in Public Works, the Chief Technical Officer, Mr. Johnson, and then the Senior Maintenance Officer at the time, Mr. Emil Lancelot, is still there. And we decided by 2020, we're going to have our main roads 100% excellent condition. Then came Erica and Maria. Now, Mr. Speaker, you're talking about spending over $200 million in that section of the country, East Coast section. Now, which means therefore, Mr. Speaker, that your government is not putting any nominal value to the lives of the people in that segment of the country, Mr. Speaker. We value the people more than that. Because we could have said, as we heard from the Prime Minister in his press conference, there was too much money to have been spent in that catchment of the country. But we value our people. And I'm happy that the member for Parliament for Castlebrooks is so happy. She's seeing and feeling the value that and the love that the Labour Party administration has for its people in Castlebrooks and the Kainago territory, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're talking about. So what is the extent of that intervention or the work we're talking about? One of the most trying times for me as a minister then was to have driven down to Williams when the road collapsed, where culverts failed, and two national players, football players, perished, Mr. Speaker. I saw the police and the fire officers extracting the bodies from that, Mr. Speaker. And what we're doing now, with that road construction that is currently taking place, Mr. Speaker, we are replacing 165 culverts, Mr. Speaker. 165 culverts have been replaced. And these would have been potential hazard, Mr. Speaker, if we had not intervened and do that, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're talking about, Mr. Speaker. Resilience to the core. No, you cannot think about building a road and talk about resilience without addressing your drainage. Then you know what they call U-drains. You're an industrial engineer, I think, you need U-drains. 1.8 kilometers of U-drains. That's the extent of the work we are doing, Mr. Speaker, on the road there. Then you talk about slipper drains. 21 kilometers of slipper drains, Mr. Speaker. That's the extent of the work that is taking place right now. We're talking about retaining walls. You have failures throughout the alignment of the road, 43 returning walls, Mr. Speaker. So that's not no, according to the late great Bruce Douglas, that's not no fried fish and Johnny Cake we're talking about there, Mr. Speaker. That's a big thing. He was not interested in small things. When he told Rules about things, he said, what? About file. He said, what file are you talking about now? If you can tell me that thing, I have $100 million, I'm going to open it. I'm not interested in, big things he's talking about. And the Labour Party is doing small things, big things, mega things, and they're still saying they see nothing, Mr. Speaker. I don't understand that. Now, the security and safety of the road speaks to its resilience too. And you're talking about 6.2, Mr. Speaker, meters of carriageway, the width of the road. So you multiply 6.2 by 3.2, you get an appreciation as to how many feet. So what is going to happen, the ease and comfort you're going to have by directional traffic flow, Mr. Speaker, you think about the security and safety that we're talking about. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to understand what we're talking about. It's not just simply building a road, Mr. Speaker, but it's building a road for the next generation, Mr. Speaker. The next generation. And it's building resilience. And it's consistent with our goals, Mr. Speaker, to make Dominica the first climate change country in the world, Mr. Speaker. I support this measure, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy for the member for Castlebrooks. I'm happy for my colleague, Mr. Honorable Corsair. And I'm happy for the people of Castlebrooks. And I'm happy for the people of Dominica. And this Labour Party administration will take this country to a sustainable path. And we're on the road to prosperity under the Labour Party administration, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Yes, Honorable Frederick.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to support the resolution to authorize the additional credit facility under the IDA for the DVRP project. Mr. Speaker, I think I stood up in this parliament a few parliaments ago and spoke about the East Coast routes and its importance to my constituency and to Dominica in general. DLP, Dominica Labour Party, started during the 1970s. And so what we're doing now is a combination of this wonderful work that the Labour Party then did and is now continuing to do. Mr. Speaker, I want to indulge my colleagues here that at sometime during the course of the new year, while the road is being completed, that we will move a resolution somehow to rename the road the Lawrence Lyons Daru Highway, especially the piece that goes through the Kainago territory. Lawrence Daru, a formidable Labour parliamentarian in the 1970s, was the parliamentarian at the time when the road was built. I think it would be an honorable thing to do, to add his name to that wonderful piece of infrastructure that sits within the Kainago territory and the Sabe constituency by extension. From the beginning of the road project, I was intimating that particular project. At the time, the DVRP started with the Ministry of Environment. And we knew of all of the troubling times that we had at the beginning of the project. We are dealing with a road network that was very old, one that cuts across a number of hills and valleys and mountains and streams, one that was built in a time when limited resources and machinery allowed it to be a road that wound along the East Coast. But we know it also served its purpose for many moons when the Kainago folks would have walked on that way, all the way to Grand Fort, up the Shimelita into Roseau. And so we know the importance of that route. and for sure, we can't contest the importance of access to the East Coast. And when we look at the infrastructure on the East Coast now, we can appreciate the work that the Dominican Labour Party has done in the past 20 years to improve the lives of the people in that particular space. If I have to speak specifically to the Sabe constituency, Mr. Speaker, you have a piece of highway going through a very rural community. And so the Kainago territory and Atkinson and Twizel and Castlebrooks and the communities that make up the East Coast are being modernized in every sense of the word. And the road is connected to what people do, livelihoods. And we have a thriving agricultural sector in the Kainago community and in Castlebrooks as well. And you can well imagine that the completion of a wonderful East Coast Road will help farmers get easy access. The commerce that happens within that space, every time you go, you drive through the East Coast, you see a number of wholesale trucks and commerce is being done. And so it makes it much easier. And the colleagues just spoke about the drainage and the culverts and all of those. These are important pieces. But I'm really more concerned about the social impact of a road network within my community. And Mr. Speaker, it definitely has begun to bring economic development within our areas. Added to the housing development, if you go through the Kalinago space right now, you see all these wonderful homes being built. We will have at the end of next year 125 homes being built under the HRP. We are completing 50 funded by the European Union, and all of those are modern homes. And Mr. Speaker, all of these are connected to roads, because one of the variations we see in the documentation is the fact that we are also giving decent driveways to people. So not only are we doing the public road, but monies are spent in doing small driveways into the homes areas. And it is very important, Mr. Speaker, because it adds some value to the land. My colleague from Castle Bruce, Honorable Octavia Alfred, spoke about the countryside and how people view our particular area. And for sure, Mr. Speaker, the road networks will definitely. So it's going to be money well spent. In every project, it's not perfect. You have to address unforeseen circumstances. you have to also improve all of the project outcomes, Mr. Speaker. And also, very importantly, we have to align what we do with what the community needs as well. So the needs when we designed the road back in 2017 or so, the needs now in 2025 have changed. And so we have to align it. The local government systems are changing. People have livelihoods that are also changing. So, Mr. Speaker, the variations here are very, very critical. We spoke earlier, Mr. Speaker, about the weather systems and how they affect road networks. And I'm very happy that we could identify the fact that even in the rainy season, we have had limited damage to road networks. Mr. Speaker, within the Carnago space, we are also building wonderful bus stops, replacing the old bus stops that were there, adding more value. And so that, of course, is bringing some additional cost. And, Mr. Speaker, while we're doing the entire realignment of the road and rehabilitation of the road, the Dominica Water Authority as well is expending over $4 million within the Salve constituency to have an improved water system. And so it means, Mr. Speaker, that we had to, in the entire road alignment, we had to move some electrical poles. We had to realign the water system that was running through right now through the center of the road. So all of that is an important part that adds to that $40 million US dollars for that East Coast road. Mr. Speaker, it is very, very clear that we will continue to do what we have to do as a government to ensure every citizen across our space gets an equal piece of the pie. And I must confess, Mr. Speaker, that the wonderful folks within the Sabe constituency are benefiting. Initially, we had $79 million assigned to the salary leg of the project. And I suspect out of the 108 million that is added here, we might get about half of that again, Mr. Speaker. I don't think it is too much to ask, because these are important piece of infrastructure within the Salve constituency. And I'd like to thank the work that the DVRP have been doing. And it's hard work, Mr. Speaker. I mean, being a minister, when the DVRP was with the environment, and only hard work of engineering, getting the supervision firm to come in, to mobilize people, to negotiate for lands and the payment of lands, getting the local councils involved in the process, targeting people who have the necessary skill sets to be part of the project, because you want people within a particular community to benefit from the road work. So all of these are tedious little things, but once the concrete and the mortar, the steel start hitting the ground, we realize that it was smooth sailing from there. Mr. Speaker, we have good confidence in the work that the Minister of Finance is doing and his team. We have also good confidence in the supervision led by by Mr. Johnson and Trotter and the wonderful people at the DVRP as they continue to push the project forward, Mr. Speaker. And once again, I want to confirm and to publicly stand with the decision the resolution to have the additional funded allocated to the VRP project, Mr. Speaker. And in this Christmas season, I think it's a wonderful, an extremely wonderful gift to the people of the East to have that commitment from the Parliament. And I dare say when you do your driving up through our space in the new year, you will be on a wonderful piece of infrastructure that I think all of us will be very, very proud of. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
Yes, Honorable Grant.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my full support to this resolution before this Honorable House this afternoon. Mr. Speaker, if you would permit me just to give a brief overview in the variation, because 108 million is a significant sum. So the original contract for lot 1 of this road, which is 10 kilometers and consisted of 2 bridges, originally we had 6 retaining walls. This increased to 14. The original for that lot, we had 13 culverts. This increased to 74. We had concrete drains, a length of 9.5 kilometers. This increased to 20 kilometers. So we moved, and that's lot 1. So lot 1, Wadi up to Cassie Bruce, increased by $44 million. We have lot 2 from Cassie Bruce to Hatton Garden. Originally, we had 8 retaining walls. This increased to 35. We had a total of 38 culverts. This increased to 92. And the concrete drains, we originally had 22 slipper drains. We had to increase to 22 kilometers of slipper drains, which include box drains. Mr. Speaker, this is a significant sum, but you could see there were a number of variations that had to be done to not only protect the infrastructure, but the persons that live along those communities. Because we protected a number of homes, because we did a lot of retaining walls outside of the scope of the project, Mr. Speaker, but that was all in an effort to protect the property of persons along the road. Mr. Speaker, this means a lot to the cassava farmers of Deepa, the fisher folk of San Sauvé. This also is going to enhance the tourism product in the Kalinago territory, because you will see the increased numbers of persons who are visiting, both the tourists and locals, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we heard the Member of Parliament for the Cassie Bruce constituency. The drive is much more smoother. The maintenance, wear and tear on your vehicle is less. And I think this is something that the people of Cassie Bruce and the Kalinago territory are proud of. Mr. Speaker, as the Minister responsible for public utilities, the WASCO is currently doing extensive work in the Kalinago territory, Mr. Speaker, and Cassie Bruce. And while I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker, I would like to extend my gratitude to the people of the Cassie Bruce territory, Cassie Bruce constituency, and the Kalinago territory for their patience and their understanding, Mr. Speaker. We know that it's difficult, but we can assure them that once the work is complete, they would be the beneficiaries of that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to extend my gratitude to the engineers, Mr. Speaker. They are all local, Mr. Trotter and Mr. Johnson, led by the PS within the Ministry of Public Works, Mr. Lancelot, for their diligence on this project. Mr. Speaker, we had seen a marked improvement over the last few months on this project, and I extend my gratitude to them for that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, while I'm on my feet, I may not get the opportunity again, so I would like to extend warm Christmas greetings to the constituency of Wesley, Mr. Speaker. During this year, I continue to receive their love, their cooperation and understanding, especially during this time while we are building the largest infrastructure project this country has seen, the international airport, Mr. Speaker. And I thank them for their cooperation and understanding during this time. Last week, we had two wonderful nights of Christmas joy, Mr. Speaker, where we had some caroling and some music, and we shared that Christmas spirit amongst our constituents, Mr. Speaker, and I thank them for that. Mr. Speaker, since I became the PAL rep, as I did from the past 5 Christmases, on Christmas Day, I share Christmas joy with the children of the constituency, and I'm looking forward to doing that again this Christmas Day. Mr. Speaker, I am hoping that the member for Margot, with the support of his colleagues, would be able to share some joy with the children of Margot, Mr. Speaker. I mean, you have two individuals who are appointed senator by Honorable Charles, Mr. Speaker, drawing over $2,000 a month. I think that for the month of December, they could give that salary, Mr. Speaker, to the member for Margot, because it's not their primary source of income, Mr. Speaker. It's something that they do, as we say, on the side. So they could give the December salary to Honorable Charles so that he can bring some joy to the people of Margot, especially the children. Mr. Speaker, remember Senator Paris is not there, Mr. Speaker, but it's important that he notes that if you want to lead, you must respect leadership. Honorable Charles brought you in, and I think that you should show the necessary respect to Honorable Charles, Mr. Speaker. And it's important that we show respect to leadership. Mr. Speaker, once again, I wish you and your family a Merry Christmas, and all the members of this Honorable House, Mr. Speaker, Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Laville, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise in support of this resolution before us to allow the Honorable Minister for Finance the ability to borrow the amount of 40 million US for the additional cost of rehabilitation works on the East Coast Road project. Mr. Speaker, I will be very brief because I'm bringing a different perspective. Of course, the Minister for Finance, and also to, just as you've heard, the Minister for Public Works would have given clear justification. But to take a different approach, in the previous debate, Honorable Henderson teased us to reflect and to ponder deeply. Well, he asked us to reflect on this, and it was, what are other countries doing, those countries that are developed, that we ought to be doing? And it was in relation to air access and the guarantee. So basically, the countries who are doing extremely well in tourism, they also to provide guarantees. And it was this reflection, Mr. Speaker, that caused me to think deeply on this as well and ask myself, what are some of the costs in other countries, and what is the cost in Dominica? And are these costs the same? So I read an article, and it was written in 2022 when the government of Barbados received financing in the amount of 115 million US dollars to construct 225 kilometers of roadway, amounting to 56 roads. And I asked myself, if we were to receive financing in this amount, 115 million US dollars, would we afford to do 56 roads? Or maybe it might be one, and if we're lucky, two. What would that be? So it's important to draw this comparison because, Mr. Speaker, when I think of this road that we are doing, the East Coast Road, because in fact, it's costing us about 86 million US dollars right now. And when we look at the length of the road and we were to do the math, it's costing us about $2.8 million per kilometer of road. Whereas in Barbados, it would cost them about $500,000 per kilometer, Mr. Speaker. So hereby, if we were to juxtapose one against the other, it suggests, therefore, that the cost of road construction in Dominica is 5.6 times that of Barbados, Mr. Speaker. And I just wanted to bring this up to cause some deeper thinking, introspection, and reflection, because the cost of construction is high in Dominica. And when we were to consider our topography, um, the hydrology, the hydraulics, geomorphology in Dominica, our slopes, Mr. Speaker, we can well understand. And we must never forget the vulnerabilities that we face and the fact that we have promised our people that we would build in a manner that is more responsible and more resilient. And there's a cost to that. And that is why I was extremely pleased when I heard particularly the address by the parliamentary representative for Cassibrus, who told us during this rainy season, a time when she would have felt absolutely vulnerable, when she would have had the phone in her hand getting ready to call the Minister of Public Works to send heavy equipment. That did not quite happen this time around. This clearly shows the manifestation of that resilience that we have built in our infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, with these few words, I wish to commend the government, this administration, for not merely making a promise, Mr. Speaker, to the world and to us as Dominicans, but crafting policy, Mr. Speaker, and turning this policy into actions that actually today it's affecting the lives in a positive way of the people of Dominica. And I just wish to commend this government highly for this action, for this global leadership in resilience, Mr. Speaker. Job well done. Job well done. And the people of Dominica shall continue to prosper and benefit from this governance structure and this great leadership, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. And with these few words, I support the resolution.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to wind up on the resolution for the $108 million from IDA to complete our DVRP program. No, so International Development Association, the IDA. Mr. Speaker, this is money that is really necessary for us to continue our development program. If you remember, we had CREED, which was the Climate Resilience Execution Agency of Dominica. And under CREED, we have these 6 result areas. And our resilient infrastructure is just one of those 6 areas. Obviously, we have this robust economy, we have strong communities, the collective consciousness, and it's our natural resource, which is what we do with geothermal, and our institutional system, all of these 6 result areas. So this one really addresses our resilient infrastructure. And though it may seem a lot, as the Minister of Public Works said, it's a significant amount, but if you don't have the vision, and if you don't see the bigger picture, you might just want to question that amount. But the point is, it's all about resilience that we're addressing. Granted, we know about the economics of it and what it brings to the community. The community is affected. We also know about the safety and the comfort to the residents of that area and anyone who uses these roads. But it really addresses our resilience to a very large extent. And the Minister for Health did explain to you 5.6 times more to construct in Dominica as compared to other islands in the region. So it is a significant amount, but I think it's money well spent in that it addresses major issues that could possibly arise later down. But we have to look at it also in terms of how everything fits in together. So this is the infrastructure, but also there are many other things that we spend quite a bit of money on. But that's just how this government functions, because we're looking at the future, we're thinking of the bigger picture. So we may spend more, but in the longer run, we actually will be saving much more because we're building back better. That is the point that we have to to keep in our mind, we're building back better. And as we go along and as we accomplish some of these development programs, right away this morning, you heard the Prime Minister immediately talk about Badiab to Pokasi and then the Glosho Bridge to Sultan. So as we get one done, we move into the next level. And this is what this government is about. And this is what we should appreciate. It's a forward-thinking government, it's a proactive government, and nothing is too much when it comes for the development of this country for the Dominican Labour Party. So with these few words, Mr. Speaker, I think in view of all what has been said, this resolution should be supported by everyone, and I have actually no reservations in supporting this resolution, and I'm pleased that all the other speakers will support this resolution as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
This concludes the debate on the motion. I will now put the question. Be it resolved that in accordance with Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of 1990, revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, this Honorable House authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of credit from the International Development Association a sum not exceeding 30,100,000 special drawing rights, equivalent to 40 million United States dollars, or 108 million Eastern Caribbean dollars, on the following terms. Interest rate, 0.75% per annum. Commitment charge, 0.5% of 1% per annum. Repayment, 60 semi-annual installment commencing March 15, 2035, and grace period, 10 years. This amount is to be used for the rehabilitation of the road from Bradiab to Hatton Garden, via Cassibus, and the Kalinago territory. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The motion has been approved.
Mr. Speaker, resolution for the Excise Tax Amendment Order 2024. Whereas Section 2 of the Excise Tax Act, Chapter 6906 of the 2017 Revised Laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, defines taxable goods as goods specified in the first schedule. And whereas Section 4.1 of the Act provides for the rates of excise tax to be prescribed in the third column of the first schedule. And whereas Section 11 of the Act provides that the goods specified in the second schedule to the Act are exempt from excise tax. And whereas Section 4.5 of the Act authorizes the Minister to amend the first and second schedules of the Act by order published in the Gazette. And whereas Section 4.6 of the Act provides that an order made under subsection 5 shall be subject to affirmative resolution of Parliament. And whereas on the 6th day of December 2024, the Minister made the Excise Tax Amendment Order 2024. And whereas it is desirable that the Excise Tax Amendment Order 2024 be affirmed, be it therefore resolved as follows. This order may be cited as the Excise Tax Amendment Order 2024. The Excise Tax Amendment Order 2024, which was laid on the table on the House on the 16th of December 2024, is affirmed. Second.
Second the motion.
Mr. Speaker, the excise tax order for which I'm seeking affirmation proposes the following amendments of the schedules of the excise tax. Chapter 6906 of the 2017 Revised Laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica. Firstly, in the 2024-2025 budget address, which was delivered on July 26, 2024, I mentioned the high incidence of non-communicable diseases and the social and economic and financial burden that these NCDs have been placing on our society. In particular, the negative impact on family life and also the strain on the healthcare system, and how these diseases are negatively affecting the overall development of our country. It was during the same address that I mentioned that with effect from September 1, 2024, government would increase the excise tax on sugary drinks by $1 per liter and alcohol and tobacco by 75 cents per liter, and 75 cents per liter and per kilogram, respectively. With the hope that this increase would help to reduce our consumption of those products and overall encourage the population towards more healthy eating and lifestyles. As regards for the Excise Tax Act, these rates are now included in the Excise Tax Amendment Order 2024 before Parliament for affirmation. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the order includes a change in the rate of excise tax on diesel classified under Customs Tariff Heading 2710.19.49 from $2.38 per gallon to $3 per gallon. This will bring the tax on diesel in line with that on gasoline. The tax on gasoline has been higher than the tax on diesel since the introduction of the excise tax. This was done at the time of introduction, considering that DOMLEC used diesel generators to power the grid. Subsequently, government further lowered the excise tax rate on diesel purchased by DOMLEC in order to reduce the cost of electricity, but the rate of diesel to other customers was not adjusted. This is the adjustment which is being proposed in the order so that consumers of diesel will now pay the same tax per gallon as consumers of gasoline. Mr. Speaker, please permit me to stress here that this increase will not apply to diesel for generation of electricity by a person with output in excess of 15 million kilowatt hours per calendar year, meaning there will be no increase in excise tax on the diesel purchased by DOMLEC for the generation of electricity. The proposed rate change is to take effect from February 1, 2025. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, government proposes a temporary increase in the age of motor vehicles imported by taxi drivers from 5 years to 6 years during the period July 1, 2024 to September 30, 2024, to facilitate delays in the arrival of some vehicles which were ordered during the exemption period but delayed as a result of unforeseen events. This amendment pertains to taxi drivers who are currently eligible for excise tax exemption on vehicles less than 5 years. The order is now commended to the House for consideration. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is before the House for debate.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the amendment. We know that it is never an easy thing to increase taxes of any sort, except when it is as a policy tool to, one would say, encourage behavior in a particular direction, as in the case of the consumption of sugary drinks. But for me, my focus is on the leveling of the excise tax on diesel to be at par with the excise tax on gasoline, So that's not an easy one because we all feel the pressure at the pump when the prices go up. Mr. Speaker, since the early 2000s, the government of Dominica decided to create a pass-through system for petroleum pricing. That is to say that the price build-up take into account the price on the world market and removing what used to be a buffer created by the government. Prior to that, the government would collect taxes based on a system that was created such that the prices were set. When the world prices go up, the government would absorb the loss. When it goes down, the government would enjoy the increase in excise or what is collected by the states. But before I continue, I just want to highlight a fundamental point that sometimes we forget. Every time we talk about government collecting taxes, we talk about it as if to say it is for the benefit of those who sit in the cabinet. Government taxes is for the general operation, maintenance, and upkeep of the states, the functioning of the states. Even to keep the lights on in this parliament comes from the taxes that we collect. Just to keep the engine spinning, as it were, is financed by the state, and that has to come from somewhere. In the case of excise tax on diesel, it is also an opportunity, although it may seem to be incidental. That is to say, the increase, hopefully, would affect behavior, just as the increase on sugary drinks. And that should, perhaps, to some extent, and not everywhere, because you still want the buses moving to and through. But personally, we can make some discretionary driving. We can carpool. We need to start talking a different language. And I know every time we talk about increase, so I'm afraid to say it because we think people are sassing us. I'm not going to fall for that. Withdrawn. Because we seem to feel as if it is always a bad thing. I mean, an increase, people in Europe, I forgot my actual data set, but people in Europe pay a lot of money for fuel because they are of the view that the consumption of fuel should be something done discretionary, but is something that should be done responsibly. And in the case of diesel, unfortunately, it will affect the truckers. The majority of their trucks are diesel operated. In the construction industry, heavy equipment, diesel operated. But on a personal, private vehicle ownership, we can offset that by being more responsible in our consumption. That is our behavior. It is not a popular thing to say, but I believe it is something that we need to consider. So, Mr. Speaker, it gives me no joy in supporting this item of the amendment of the excise tax. But I think it is something that is also necessary for the state to more seamlessly collect excise, collect revenue on the purchase of fuel, gasoline, and diesel. And as was said, it is not going to affect DOMLEC because it's a different regime. The price build-up and the way we set it up from the Ministry of Trade is different for DOMLEC as for the rest of us. So it still protects the consumers, of course, to a certain extent, to a great extent of electricity, to a great extent. And I look forward to the day when we will get rid of the generation of electricity by the use of diesel. When we transform and move into geothermal generated power. It is also my wish that sometime in the not too distant future, we will not even be concerned about diesel or gasoline operated vehicles as we move to more electric vehicles. And I also want to urge us, those of us who have to buy vehicles, to consider hybrid vehicles. No, I wasn't telling you to buy an electric vehicle, Minister. I wouldn't do you that because you might forget to charge it. Next thing your battery die, you stop on the road, somebody can run a cable and give you a charge. So I wouldn't suggest that for you. But a hybrid might be the solution. And seriously, the government is now considering a proposal on the duties. I know finance will not be too excited, but the duties on hybrid vehicles. A hybrid vehicle could give you an extended mileage on your gasoline or your diesel. And that is where we need to be heading. I think we need to start looking forward and less in the rearview mirror, but more in the windshield. Because it is a forward moving system. We have to start thinking about this thing, and this could be perhaps an incentive for us to do the switch to hybrid. And I know that when you go online and buy your vehicles in Japan, there is also a hybrid option. It's a little more, but it gives you, for the operation of that vehicle, much more benefit, so you will enjoy the savings that you can realize, especially if it's a plug-in hybrid that can give you an amazing mileage, about 100 kilometers on one gallon. So that is something that we're hoping we can encourage, and this would be an incentive. This would be an incentive for us to move towards encouraging that. Finally, Mr. Speaker, this is coming at a fortuitous time because we've seen within the global petroleum business that prices have been pretty stable over the last several months. And now we are entered into the winter months. We're expecting the prices to remain stable, and that will again make it easier for us to absorb that increase. Now, I know it won't affect most of us around the table because most of you drive in your gasoline vehicle, except for where some people have new diesel, vehicles. So they will. I know they're not happy with me, but but seriously, I think it is an opportunity for us to start thinking of the future and how this can be done. But like I said, we're fortunate because this was a decision I was taken months ago. We decided to stay it because we felt that we should allow the summer months to pass when we normally see the peak in the price of petroleum products globally. And this is now a time to help us to adjust, as we will not feel the impact as we would have if it was at a different time of the year. So, Mr. Speaker, I support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise in support of the amendments. I can clearly understand why the Minister for Trade would be so enthusiastic in certain regards. As I drive a diesel and he has a hybrid. But I would imagine this is in line with his pursuits towards renewable energy for all of us here in Dominica. So I commend him for that push. But Mr. Speaker, I rise particularly to speak of the health components with these amendments, Mr. Speaker. And there are many determinants of healthcare. There are some that we can change, and there are some that we can't. So in terms of the aspects related to your genes, nature, Mr. Speaker, your physical attributes, there are many things that you can't change. However, there are many social determinants of health, Mr. Speaker, that we must pay attention to. And that is how we grow, how we live, where we work, what we do, how we behave, the choices that we make, Mr. Speaker. Many of those are related to these social determinants of health. And of course, it affects our healthcare outcomes. So, Mr. Speaker, today, what we have putting forward here, Mr. Speaker, is an increase in the excise taxes as it relates to sugary drinks, tobacco, and alcohol. And I just wish to, through you, Mr. Speaker, tell the nation that these amendments are certainly not unusual. This is done throughout the world. For example, this has been adopted successfully in Mexico, where we are seeing the changes in the behavioral patterns of consumers. We are also seeing it in the United States, in Berkeley, California, where it is proven that the decision to increase taxes affects the behavior of consumers. And that is what we hope to achieve here in terms of making healthier choices for people. And we can well understand, Mr. Speaker, when we consider healthcare equity, we would imagine there's certain elements of our population who would be affected disproportionately, Mr. Speaker. And that would be affected based or influenced based on the level of education, your socioeconomic standing, and so on, as to what choices that you make. And we have a responsibility as a government to implement policy and to enact law that protects everyone, especially the most vulnerable in our population, to ensure that they themselves are positioned or encouraged to make the best choices possible. So this is what this move is about. What we intend to do, Mr. Speaker, going forward, is to use within our ministry the different components. For example, health promotion, to go out there and give people alternatives during the new year. So if they were to move away, in this case, from sugary beverages, what should that be replaced with? How do you go about making the juice? What's the right proportions of sugar that should be added to your drinks, your juice, your homemade juice, Mr. Speaker? So that is what we expect to do. We have right now 3 nutritionists within our health system. One, in fact, is a PhD, just renewed the contract for this individual. And we're expecting a lot from our nutritionists throughout this upcoming year to educate our people and ensure that they make the best choices possible so they can live long and we could rid our nation from these chronic non-communicable diseases that we're plagued with, killing about 3/4 of our people, Mr. Speaker. So I'm in support of these amendments wholeheartedly, but we have to do our part. We stand ready at the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Social Services to do our part, and we just encourage the entire population that this is not punitive in any way, Mr. Speaker. It's not to make our lives harder in any regard, but really, in fact, to ensure that we live longer and we have a better quality of life while we're blessed to be on this earth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yep. Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I mean, the reality is, Mr. Speaker, it is really, this matter is really trying to find a balancing act. We know people love their drinks. There are people who love their Coke and their Sprite. And there are people who use these sugary drinks as a source of energy. Then there may be people like me who don't drink but who buy a lot of alcoholic beverages. Because there is some who don't drink and there's some who drink. There's some who don't like to drink and there's some who love to drink. There are some who don't smoke, but there are some who love a cigar after a meal. And we have to respect that. So, I mean, I'm dealing with things in a practical way, Mr. Speaker. But the reality is, the entire international health system is grappling with health issues. Grappling. And whenever the WHO meets, whenever PAHO meets, the Pan American Health Organization meets, that is central to the consideration. What kind of policies and programs we can put in place in our respective countries to help fight the prevalence of chronic non-communicable diseases in particular, because that is a major strain on the health, wellness, and wealth of nations, because it is a huge cost to treat people who would have contracted this disease. And the cost is largely because, Mr. Speaker, it's a recurrent thing. You can't cure. So it's recurrent treatment. It is not that you get a cut, they give you some antibiotics, the cut cures, and you move on. And then if you don't take care of yourself, Mr. Speaker, so if you have diabetes, you don't take care of yourself, you run the risk of kidney failure. Your lungs will get affected. And so you may not die from diabetes, but you may die from diabetes-related illnesses. And so if you're diabetic, then you're hypertensive, then you have a kidney problem. It's a huge cost. And I have had the misfortune, Mr. Speaker, of interacting with scores of Dominicans on health issues. And I have seen families who have had $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in the bank, saved in their old age, to enjoy the rest of their life on earth, and somebody falls sick. And they're moved to literally almost nothing in the banks. Because healthcare the world over is prohibitive. It's prohibitive. And so we're not here to, as a government, to dictate how people run their lives, dictate how people use their money, or what they want to do. But we have an obligation as a government and a country to protect the citizens and to poke the citizens to reflecting on the decisions that they make and the choices that they make with regards to their consumption. So we're not here to say, well, don't take sugar, or don't eat an ice cream, or don't eat up a cake, or don't take a drink, or don't smoke a cigarette if you want to smoke a cigarette. But in all things, we have to do it in moderation. And in all things, we have to inform and educate ourselves about the implications if we move from moderation to excessive use and consumption. And I think that we have to move to a point of, and this is why when we put the new portfolios in place in the 2019, after 2019 election, and we introduced the wellness part of the ministry, and even on the health centers we call them health and wellness centers, because we do not want to we have to move away from the health centers being a place where you go and treat yourself when you get sick, but rather a place where you can be guided in how to maintain your well-being. So you go there even if you're not sick, to tell you about the diet that you should follow, to tell you about the exercise regime that you can do, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think, Mr. Speaker, we in Dominica, and it's a natural phenomenon that the more developed you get, is the less you rely on things you did before. So if you look at the history of the United States, if you go to the United States and look at the data in 1930, 1940, 1950, 1960, the black people in America were the healthiest because they were among the poorest. They're still poor today, but they were among the poorest. The difference between now and then was that they were growing the collard greens in the backyard. They had the tomatoes, they had the green beans, they had the spinach. So while they would have loved their fried chicken, but that would have been tempered by their sweet potatoes from the backyard and from the yams and from the greens and so on. So they had a high consumption of vegetables. But the moment they start getting jobs and moving on the social ladder, and they also drive a Cadillac and then they drive through. KFC drive through. And man on a big, long Cadillac and he put the seat back and he stop in the drive-through. It's a bucket of chicken he wants. And in this bucket of chicken, there's no vegetables. You understand what I'm saying? And so this is what happened here in Dominica. That we would have had a few fowls running the yard and they were laying in the grass for us and we go pick up the eggs. We had spinach and we take the seeds and we spread and we keep having spinach all through the time. And we'll go cucumber in backyard and so forth. You don't see those things anymore. And it's not a criticism of anybody. It is just that we have moved on. We have supermarkets and mini marts, in the villages, and we easy access to these things. And when we go and we take it. And it's a challenge. And how do we know? Because when you look at the Ministry of Health, the costs are run in the hospital and the health system. About 60 to 70% of the pharmaceuticals we purchase is to treat CNCDs. And the unfortunate thing is that when these medications are prescribed, the majority of us don't take it. So most families in Dominica, they have their own little pharmacy at their home, amount of medication they have that they have not used and so forth. And it's a cost. I mean, we all have a little thing or bubble or a little sink there or all the medication is and so on. What do you call them again? A cabinet, a little cabinet. And all the medication in there. And all we see is little plastic containers. A little yellow one, an orange one, and a white cover. Many of those things. And granny and grandpa putting in a plastic, a number of drugs in plastic. So when you see a granny take out a bag for you, I mean, multiple medication there from different packages. You understand what I'm saying? And so we have to ramp up on the education, on the public education, because it is a frightening situation when a 38-year-old has an acute case of diabetes and then also hypertensive. And that person gets a stroke. And that person has 3 children home, single mother. And the person is paralyzed half of the body, cannot work. It doesn't have to take anybody with common sense to understand the implication for that family. And the more of us who are sick is the more pressure it places on the health system. So the health system now is no longer primary health care. It is secondary and tertiary. Because everybody who is sick has to go to the hospital. So the hospital that's supposed to be dealing with 30% of the sickness in the country has to deal with 100% now. Because if you look at the health centers that we built and all the health centers across Dominica, if we don't watch it, they'll become obsolete, meaning they will not be used by people anymore. Because you have a higher density of private doctors, private facilities, and people like to go private facilities. To private doctor, that's an in thing in Dominica, private doctor. If you're pregnant and you go to the health center in the village, you get even better care than a private doctor because it's free. The nurse is always available. The doctor is not available, and you skip a session, and that's a critical session you skip. And that's where you get complications when you go and have the baby. I mean, Mr. Speaker, I'm not looking at, I Google them, I'm talking about things I interact with on a daily basis, Mr. Speaker. You understand? And so I like to have those conversations in the country. Not to lecture anybody, because that's not what I want to do. But it is something that preoccupies my mind on a regular basis. And it is affecting productivity. Because one of the things that we have not done, because I don't think the statistics system in our countries, and I'm talking about the entire Caribbean, have the kind of sophistication or the resources that we need to do those kinds of analysis as the United States and other countries. The impact of health on productivity and the economy. You understand? It's huge. The number of sick days we take from work and the extent of sick leave that we take. If you have to put it together, it's a significant part of the GDP. It's huge. and the number of people who have to be constitutionally given to have them medically bought off. And that's why I believe, Mr. Speaker, within the employment environment, we have to institute a program for health and wellness. Exercise. You know, I had a friend who had a business, and you know one of the things he used to do is to have vitamin C, and he give everybody, all the employees vitamin C every morning they come to work. And he teach them scared, you know. And when everybody will get vitamin C, I have less people getting sick from the flu and all these things. So every day you come in, people will take in the vitamin C from the employer. But I think we have to institute, and I think these things help to poke people's consciousness. The exercise program, and we've tried it in public service where we tell public officers once a week you leave work early and you go and exercise. Not because we believe that once a week is enough, but we're hoping that that could serve as a catalyst for us to want to do it. And so we have to jump off the vehicle a little bit more and walk a little bit more for us to get this balancing. And I understand we're busy and so forth, but it is an emergency. It is a global emergency, a regional emergency, and a national emergency. And I recall in 2010, thereabout, when we had this symposium in Trinidad, the focus of that symposium at the time was on CNCDs. And I always said to people, if we believe COVID was impactful from a health standpoint, I don't think we have taken time to appreciate the impact of CNCDs from a health standpoint. It's huge, it is frightening. In my view, it parallels the impact of climate change on the society. And so, this is, while the government may because every tax measure brings in revenue, but the revenue is going to bring to you is not going to shift the needle. It's not going to be significant. But it is an effort and I hope that it can poke our consciousness. And I understand that there are some private enterprise who import these beverages who have a concern. We have met with them, and we are still prepared to continue considering this as time goes by and so forth. And if there's a need for us to review the mechanism, we are prepared to do so. But I believe that the prevalence of CNCs require a national effort. I would like to see the priests and the pastors preach about this in church. I would like to see the schools have that as a center of their extracurricular and even mainstream activity, and that that the public literature pervades the society. So everywhere we turn, we see the issue of CNCDs and health and wellness and exercise and so forth. And so, Mr. Speaker, we really want to bring that consciousness apart. So we understand that we're not here to tell people don't take these things. I don't take, as I said to the public, I don't take anything that has added sugar on it. I would hope that others do the same, but it's not for me to determine for people. We all have to make individual choices. But those of us who have to take, I mean, Mr. Speaker, I mean, a vanilla ice cream, a coconut ice cream, nice, you know. I mean, so I'm not going to tell a man, don't take a, I can tell you, when I see a coconut ice cream, my friend, I feel like grabbing that thing and having some, you know. But so, and when I go home at night and I feel peckish and so on because you go to a sugar withdrawal and you're tempted now to take a cake in the fridge and eat that, you know. But I have to watch it. I say, my brother, no, I shall not be tempted. You know, I shall not be tempted. I shall not fall for temptation. So we're not telling. I'm not here to. We're not here to advocate people don't take your ice cream. This thing is very important. You can have an ice cream. You can have a cake, but you also have to exercise and watch the health because it is serious. So this is really. So if you realize we're not here talking about excise tax, none of us who spoke there talking about excise tax and much revenue. The Minister of Finance is not talking about how much revenue you can get from this and all this thing. This is an opportunity for us now to poke the consciousness. Obviously, we in the Ministry of Health have to do more, as the Minister has articulated, some education and stuff, but it's not the Ministry of Health alone. The Ministry of Health is not going to address that issue. This has to be a concerted, systemic, national effort. All of us have to play our part. And because each of us is responsible for our own health and wellness, and each of us is responsible for our family health and wellness. And by this, I believe that we have to be, during the COVID time and after the hurricane, we had encouraged backyard gardening. And a lot of people got involved in planting of lettuce and green beans and so forth. Something we have to go back to. You know, we don't need to put all our backyard in concrete. You can leave a space. And if you have no space, then we can use the old fridge rather than throwing it, and the old basin and the old stove, and we can use it to grow our food in the back, and the old tires and so forth, that we can fill it with soil and do different things, etc., etc., etc. Vertical agriculture and so on. You can put things on our walls and our stuff, and on our veranda, the railings of our veranda and so on. Get the pots and put the stuff, and so we can get that balanced diet and so forth. And so, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, for speaking so long on this matter. But when I get going on this matter, I don't want to stop, because it is a huge preoccupation of mine. And as you know, for several years now, I've been on that crusade and that mission to highlight this to people. Highlight this, because it is serious. And this is why those of us who prepare food for people to sell, let's be careful. The coconut water is good for people. Somebody is refreshing. As a matter of fact, back in the days, Mr. Speaker, they use it as IV, as drips, as we call it. So it has some properties. The young coconuts, the sailors used it. You guys don't know it. No, you guys don't read any history, man. What? You guys have read your history, man. Yeah, you should use it as stuff. But what is happening now in the Caribbean, Dominica included? They're adding sugar to this stuff. They're adding sugar to coconut water. And so somebody now who has diabetes, believing that they're walking in town, they want to drink a little coconut water to refresh themselves. And then your sugar spikes. Your sugar spikes. So I'm saying, let us not get into this practice. Let us desist from this practice, because we're placing people unsuspectingly in a very dangerous and compromising situation. And so we need to be mindful of that. And the other issue on the tourism, we had taken a decision here some years ago to encourage newer buses, bigger buses. And Mr. Speaker, when I see these guys driving these buses, some millionaire guys, we have Jenna Geese, we have Renault Alcindor from Grand Bay, we have Ghost, Kelly the Ghost, we have Saxon Laura. I mean, these guys are international. When you see these guys driving the buses, I had to call Renault the other day, tell him, my brother, you have to look like you have to take me to work every day, because that bus, they're looking nice. And so the all in effort towards enhancing the fleet of buses so that we can give our visitors a better experience when they come to Dominica, more comfortable situation. So there was an issue there, and we tried to facilitate one or two of the applicants. And so this guy is lucky for us to come to Parliament to pass a law to facilitate him. In other countries, they'll name the law after him. But we're very happy to see the quality of the bus is improving, and we urge others to do likewise, so that we can get into the high-end buses, and so that because we have more and more discerning visitors coming in, more and more high-end tourists coming with high spending power, and they want the same luxury that they have in their countries. They want the same luxury that they want luxury that their money can can buy and to pay for, and we have to be in a position to offer them that kind of service, that kind of comfort when they come to Dominica. And so we're looking forward to that. And then you have the issue of the excess tax on the diesel. Now, for years, we had the excise tax on gasoline at $3 and diesel at $2.38. And we felt that it's important for us to level the playing field, and so that there's parity and there's equity in it. And of course, obviously, the government will get some revenue from this, so we can better maintain the roads and provide goods and services for the country. So we believe that this will certainly bring the playing field to a level area. This will come into effect on the 1st of February, so it gives us some time to do a transition. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, and of course, this will not be impact electricity rates, because DOMLEC will be exempt, and any other entity that's involved in manufacturing that is producing that extent of energy for manufacturing, based on what the law says, you could also be potentially be exempt if you get to that level of production of kilowatts hours for your business place. And so there will not be any major dislocation, any major impact on the consumers. It's a matter of leveling the playing field. But the reality is, from a fiscal standpoint, I believe that the government has to start reviewing its fiscal policies and sources of revenue, because in the next few years or so, you're going to have to use less diesel imported into the country. And something that you have to start looking at, we have to start looking at, and to increase our tax administration, the efficiency of tax collection, so that we don't have to bring in any new taxes. But if we capitalize on the existing ones and improve on the management, use technology to manage the tax system better rather than the people we're still heavily depending on, I believe that we can address those challenges, Mr. Speaker, and so on. So, all in all, I support the measures here. I think they're necessary at this time, and we look forward to them having a positive impact on the society. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to wind up on the debate of the Excise Tax Amendment Order 2024. I think all the salient points have been mentioned before by the former speakers, which is that it won't affect the diesel, the excise tax on diesel for production of, for DOMLEC, besides leveling the playing field for both gas vehicles and for diesel vehicles from $2.38 to $3. Apart from that, in terms of the age of the vehicles, from 5 years to 6 years, we should also address developing and improving our tourism product in terms of the buses being used. And for the sugary drinks, the main issue was really to send a message to the public. And this is a government that leads from the front. This is why we've taken this initiative, so that the public can join us in this fight against the chronic non-communicable diseases. The different implications from a social aspect and the loss of productivity as well has been highlighted in the former speakers. So, Mr. Speaker, I think all the points have been mentioned before, and it would seem wise for us to adopt this resolution. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
This concludes the debate on the motion. I will now put the question. Be it therefore resolved as follows. 1. This order may be cited at the Excise Tax Amendment Order 2024. 2. The Excise Tax Amendment Order 2024, which was laid on the table of the House on 16th day of December 2024, is affirmed. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The motion has been affirmed.
Break. 7. Break up. 7. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House be suspended until 7 p.m. 7 p.m. tonight.
7 p.m. tonight.
Second the motion, Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the House be suspended until 7 p.m. tonight, this evening. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The House stands suspended until 7 p.m. this evening.